Interview with elite triathlete Jeremy Hopwood. Check this out. How did you get involved in triathlons?
Yep, so in terms of triathlon and that, for me, it was one of those things where as a kid growing up, I actually saw the Ironman Hawaii on TV. Remember seeing that as a kid, and for whatever reason that stuck in the back of my mind as like, hey, that'd be something cool to do. And then growing up, I actually didn't grow up as a swimmer or anything like that, but played a lot of sports that involved running, so things like soccer and the like. And but I always had it in the back of my mind. I would like to actually go race triathlon. And then when I moved to Canada 12 years ago, my wife's family is originally from Penticton, or still is. Her 93-year-old grandmother lives up there. And so that was, at the time, Ironman was hosted up in Penticton. And so it just, knowing people who'd done it in the family and the like, it was like the natural step was to sign up and to do that. And that was in 2007. So this time, 10 years ago, was when I signed up for my first Ironman, and then a year later raced up in Penticton, and then kind of got the bug from there.
And now there are three components, right? Like swimming, biking, and running. Yep. Now swimming is something you started off late, right? Yeah, for sure. So like I'm the Australian who learned to swim late. Grew up actually pretty close to one of the surf beaches in Australia down in Adelaide, but I never, basically 25, 50 meters, that would have been as far as I could have got in a hurry if there was a shark behind me or something like that. So, but yeah, came over here, and so that was an interesting challenge in mid-20s, and that kind of dragging yourself to the pool and getting lessons and that, and just getting the confidence factor. And that was definitely something that took time, and that was kind of the first challenge there, is just getting comfortable in the water and that. And I mean, and like anything, took time on that, but definitely feel a lot more comfortable in the water. Didn't grow up with that natural swimming stroke, so it's still the part of the sport that's my biggest challenge and opportunity. But yeah, but I definitely remember the old outdoor pool at UBC, which is no longer, and going there after work and that, and trying to get some laps in. And remember the first time I swam 200 meters, first time I swam 400 meters straight and that. So it's that was definitely that was one of the cool things about triathlon, was doing something that was very much outside my comfort zone on that front. You are driven, and that's so wonderful. And for our viewers, what is long distance triathlons?
Yep, so the triathlon world's got a few different distances. So the one that you see in the Olympics, it's what's called standard distance or Olympic distance, and that's it's kind of based on the Olympic longest event. So 1,500 meter swim, 40-kilometer bike, and then a 10-kilometer run. Long distance triathlon is normally anything up from what's called a half Ironman up until the Ironman distance. And so a lot of people have heard of Ironman. They might have seen Hawaii on TV, on the NBC shows and the like. And so that is actually a 3.8K swim, 180K bike, and marathon at the end. But there's a few different distances in between, and the world governing body ITU actually has its long distance, which is 3K swim, 120K bike, and 30K run. And that's kind of, it actually comes from a bit of a historical distance back in the time in a race that was in France. But it's a good balance for long distance racing, in that you don't fully beat up your legs with a marathon at the end, but you're still out there for a good 6 hours plus on the day. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And tell us about your training and nutrition. Like basically, how important is nutrition to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me is like with training and nutrition and everything, it's all about like finding the balance and a rhythm that works for you. So definitely say for me, I'm like somebody who's like perfect with everything. I just try to make good decisions where it goes through. And then from a nutrition perspective, is like a lot of it's about like what's convenient but still a good decision, right? And so that's something I look to like take through. And then in terms of recovery and the like as well, it's like the convenience and having something that works and it's easy to get to, so that's good. So,
yes, and tell us about your involvement with Powered by Chocolate Milk.
Yeah, so I've been happy to be working with Powered by Chocolate Milk for about 4 years now, I think. But the good thing with that relationship for me and like the actual product is something I've used for like the last 8-9 years. So even before working with Powered by Chocolate Milk is like the great thing about it is like finishing a run, finishing a bike or that, like you can go by like the nearest corner store or anything like that, and like it's very easy to get and pick up, and it works for me, and that's a big decision for me on like anything to around nutrition, and that is that it's not something you have to like take half an hour to kind of prepare, and that it's like great that you can just grab something to recover, and that straight after like either, and for me I use it after like a hard session, so whether it be like a hard run with intervals, like a long run, or like a hard bike, and so that's where it fits into the cycle for me.
Yes, and you know, when you're in the peak season of your training, how important is your sleep, your nutrition, and your training? Take us through your peak season of training.
Yeah. So for me, I'd say like the number one thing in terms of recovery, and that for me is sleep. Like so, and for me, I found is that like if I try to cut back on sleep, that's when you start to feel sick, and then that potentially impacts your training, and then it can start to snowball, and then it can even become a bit of a mental thing. So trying to get a good amount of sleep is something that's always been a big priority for me. It varies depending on the amount of training you're doing, and the person, but for me it's like between 7 and 9 hours, like try to get, and to go from there. So that's definitely a key thing in terms of training, and that also means making some decisions like when combining work and family and that with training, and how much you can do and when you can do it. So I'm not a very early morning person, and so I do make the decision of trying to work out when I'm doing sessions or when I'm trying to get training in, to make sure it like fits around, so that I'm not getting into a bit of a debt around sleep.
Yes, and also staying injury-free.
Yep, for sure. And that's the other thing, I think, when you're getting fatigued, and even if you're getting all the sleep, you're getting all the recovery, when you're getting fatigued with the amount of training, is like you can sometimes start to notice that you just the brain's not fully there, because it's like it's still tired and fatigued, and that's when, even if you're out on a run and that, you just need to be careful about not like doing something silly and stepping and twisting an ankle and things like that. And so I think it all goes into one from there. And then in terms of injuries, like I've been relatively lucky, nothing major, but what I try to do is get on top of anything. Like, so try to be relatively proactive around like working with my physio and that, and if I do have a niggle, is not waiting for it to disappear, is like trying to understand it and then making the decision that's right for it, whether it's be doing exercises for it, taking some rest or that, but not trying to push through for the sake of pushing through.
Right, and your body's a machine, and you know, let's go back to how do you balance family and work and performing at a high performance level?
Yep. So for me, it's it's always about like, okay, for me, it's around priorities, and like priorities is got family and got work and that, and so they're the big priorities in my life. So a lot of it for me is like trying to fit in what I need to do in order to get fit, in order to race. And so from that perspective, I use commuting to work like a lot. I'd say most weeks I've got about 8 to 10 hours of my training is getting somewhere, whether it be to work, back and forth on the bike, or if I'm going to the in-laws for dinner, is like often sometimes I'll run there to go get dinner and just get in a short 20-minute run and the like. And so utilizing different mechanisms like that to kind of squeeze in some extra time in that, and also from a perspective of like, it's always, as well as being time efficient, it's kind of, for me, it's a good like mental break or relief. So when I finish the day, instead of hopping in the car and sitting in traffic, is that I know if I ride home and that, and a lot of the times it's actually the same amount of time or quicker if I ride home from downtown to Steveston or the like, depending on the bridge traffic and that. So I find I'm in a lot better mental space when I get home, and then from there it's actually, I find it easier than if I'm going to go do a run or that later in the day, versus if I've been stuck in a car or the like, and then get home and kind of get that end of day fatigue that a lot of people get, including myself.
And you do double workouts?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the one thing with triathlon for sure, is that because you're trying to get a balance in across 3 sports, is that often be doing more than one session in a day. And so once again, that's about like choosing, for me, that's like, how do you make that work? And often that's choosing one of those sessions as a recovery session. So the perspective is that what is the key session of the day? So is the key session a swim? Is the key session a run? Or is it the bike? And making sure that you're putting the energy in order to do that session properly, but at the same time getting some of the mechanics practice or the techniques practice at the other sports. So for me, one thing, if I'm doing a long run on the day or something like that, is that that'll be the core session, but then I might have a recovery swim later in the day, or even just an easy bike ride or that, just to flush out the legs or to get some weight off the legs with a swim or that. And so that's how I try to get it in there from that perspective. I'd say with running, if I'm in a run build, I actually often find if I do an easy run in the morning, then I do a harder session later in the day, is that even if it's just a 15-minute, 10-minute, just jog after I've dropped off one of my kids at school or something like that, just 10 minutes to get the body moving, then I find that afternoon session actually goes a little bit better, because for me, the body's kind of woken up and understood, okay, this is what you're going to do with it later in the day.
You got it down to a science, Jeremy. That's wonderful. And what is next for you?
Yeah, so next for me, I mean, just after having raced up in Penticton at the, it was the World Championships for both duathlon and long course tri, and racing at age group up there. So now next up for me will be, major thing is Gunner Shore cross country. That's a fantastic local race. It's great fun to go jump in the puddles, run in the beach, whatever weather brings. And then a lot of the local running series here in Vancouver. So we have some great local races, whether it be the Icebreaker, AK, which is on my doorstep in Steveston. It's kind of always weird to be able to leave your house and 600 meters away. You got a start line, and then looking forward to doing the first half in February, and hopefully no more snow this year, and that we'll have the start line going for that. And then later in the year, still trying to work out exactly what doing, but I think it's time for me to go do another iron distance triathlon of some description, and take some of the fitness from this year, and then look to target that. But where and when that one is, haven't yet decided on that front.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Thank you.